Okay, good afternoon. My name is Motoo Kuskabe, and this is the first time for me to make a lecture together with my wife, so I'm a little bit nervous. And today, my presentation aims at very much the concrete action proposals. As you heard from Professor Ryden, that I am not a pure academician, but rather practitioners. So I'm going to focus on some concrete project aims, but I try my best to based upon some kind of evidence that our institution collected. So the aim of my presentation is to achieve the SDG 3. Have you ever heard of SDG 3? I think this is the most important one within the whole SDGs because this is ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. And maybe you notice in this SDG 3 something different from other targets that include two objectives in the single target: health and well-being. And everybody wonders why there is a two substance within one target. And I try to explain why based upon some of the evidence which we collected using the community culture system. And we ask these questions, and we use a so-called community culture system, which I originally developed by myself, and using this in past 10 years to collect some of the community informations. And part one, what is the SDG surveys? Oh, sorry, next one. What is the CCS surveys? And we explained that we started the community culture system survey. We started probably the first system which combined health and other type of well-beings together in the same social studies that analyze the causes and the consequences of the major risks in these two areas. And the CCS survey is conducted first in UK, actually London, Camden area first, and Liverpool, Kensington area. And then in Japan, in 9 cities. And actually this was first social epidemiological studies in these cities. I'll explain what does it mean. And survey investigated the life history of more than 7,000 people living in these cities, and asking whether and when they had 42 risk factors and 23 resilience factors. And what is unique about the community culture system is, first, the CCS survey asked questions on 8 major welfare areas, so we can get a multi-dimensional studies and data. And the second uniqueness is we ask not only yes or no to the question of whether you have some kind of risks, but also we ask when the risk started and when the risks ended, in order to create some time series data. And if we have a multi-dimensional time series data, we can create the so-called panel data, which is most suitable for any kind of social activities. And as a first step, we have to identify what are the risk factors based upon the preceding studies. In order to identify risk factors, we need the risk factors for all life stages, starting from infancy stage to school age, and then employment years, middle-aged, and old age. So we identify all life stage risks and resiliences, and also covering 8 aspects of people's life, like health, mental health, education, family, child rearing, poverty, friends and neighbors. Friends and neighbors actually the same as the social capital, which she talked about. This covers the whole area of 42 risk factors. And I don't explain each factors, but you can find all the 42 factors in this diagram. And then we are going to identify so-called resilience factors. And resilience factors are the people's strengths to cope with various hardships. And we identify 23 resilience factors in 3 broad areas. First area is a self-help, which is composed of the 3 subgroups: sense of value, for example, self-confidence, or having goals and plans, trust in others, etc. These are the sense of value consists of his resilience. The second area is access to education. Like the parents are very eager to promote his children's education. That is one resilience factor. And education outcome is, for example, you as a college graduates, this is the resilience factors for you. And as for the mutual help, this is roughly corresponding to the social capital areas, family relationship, and friend and neighborship relations. And the third area of resilience is the social security. This is provided by the government or the local governments. So we define 23 resilience factors to analyze the people's behavior. And once we decided these factors, the next step is collecting data from the actual people. But uniqueness of the CCS is we try as much as possible to include all types of vulnerable people. Vulnerable people include sometimes they are not having a permanent residence or not having a permanent job. So it's very difficult to collect data from these people. So first time when we start with the survey in Liverpool City, Kensington area, this is the most deprived area at that time. We were warned by the city council officials that if you go to this community and ask to answer this questionnaire, nobody will answer. They are very much hostile to the city government, for example. So they strongly recommended us to work with the local community-based organizations, which the local people has some trust. So we decided all the studies should be in collaboration with local community organizations. And usually this kind of social studies is conducted by so-called random sample basis. And this is considered as a very good method, a scientific method. But we tried as a trial and error process in Shinjuku City. We used a random sampling, and the answer rate is less than 20%, and all the answer is coming from the older generation without any social risks. So this will provide us much bias than this more usage of the community-based organizations. And in each city, we collaborate with 30 to 40 community organizations. And then what is the findings, major findings of the CCS survey? And the findings first finding is the proliferation is the developmental risks among youth generations. And so far, many people consider that Japan's biggest problem is the aging of the populations and very few birth rate. But this CCS studies found that the most worrisome problem in Japan is a rapid expansion of risks among youth generations, such as difficulty learning lessons, truancy, bullied, abused and depressed, and finally socially withdrawal. That means completely withdraw from any kind of social relationship. So these are the we called it probably next slide. This is one example of depression, ratio of the depressed people with various generations. And the purple bar means a young generation, under 34 years old. And in, for example, 4 cities, so this ratio in younger generation is over 30%, in some cases over 40%. And this is a very rapid increasing pace for all generations. This is for the depressed people. And the second one is difficulty in keeping up with lessons. And this also shows a very rapid, almost doubling of the ratio in the young generation of the people who have a difficulty in keeping up with lessons. Maybe different from yours, but I think until this study was made, many of the Japanese people believe that Japan is one of the world's top country in terms of universal education. So it is rather shocking to everybody. But actually, I consulted with many community-based organizations whether you feel this is strange or natural. And everybody told me that this is completely in line with their notion of the current level of the study for the young people. So next one, second finding of the CCS survey is a social factors are the main determinants of all these risks. And for example, many people believe that the mental illness is caused by biological or medical causes. But one of the most important determinants are social relationship with various persons and local work communities. And third findings is among such social relationship, the most important relationship is shown to be with their parents. And the developmental risks of children have very strong correlation with insufficient contact with their parents, and often scolded by their parents, and the parents' anxiety about child rearing, and the parents' mental stress. So these all are the major causes of the developmental risks of the children. And this is, for example, if the children has a little contact with father during their infancy, these children will face, when they become the school age, the difficulty in learning lessons by 1.93 times more. And on the employment stages, such people face a jobless youth risk 4.22% more than the people who has a normal contact with their parents. And finally, as for the poverty, they increase 1.73%. So the infancy level stage contact or relationship with the parents have a very big impact on the future life. And the fourth finding is isolation is a strong risk factor for mental health. Of course, maybe you can feel that way. For example, social withdrawal, which I explained, no trusted groups to belong, and the difficulty playing with peers are the three mental health risk factors which have the strongest impact on all developmental risks of the children. So how to cope with isolation is the biggest issue here. And so far, all bad news, but only good news is there are resilience factors to mitigate these risks. For example, self-esteem, trust in others, family support, and support from friends and neighbors. That are the major resilience factors having a very big risk reduction impact. However, these resilience factors are only effective in those cities which has abundant social capital. I'll show one example. For example, the resilience factor, which I explained, for example, having a self-esteem is a very good example of the resilience factors. And we compare the two cities' effect of the self-esteem. One is Liverpool cities in UK, and another is the Kawasaki cities in Japan. Both are very similar cities. Both at one time the very prosperous shipbuilding industries and manufacturing industries. But in the case of Kawasaki cities, they increased the population in the recent 2 decades, and there is strong gentrification appears in Kawasaki cities, so their social bond becomes weaker. So comparing the effect of the self-esteem to the future risks in Liverpool cities, there is a very strong risk mitigation impact. For example, in the case of self-esteem on bullying, 0.36 times less risks. But in the case of Kawasaki, 0.445 times. And if the risk is on the poverty, there is almost no effect in the case of Kawasaki City, while in Liverpool City still has risk mitigation impact. The same is true for this. This is the effect of the neighbor support in both cities. Network of friends. So in Liverpool, there is a very strong risk reduction, and in Kawasaki, there is less. And sometimes these are the increased risks having the people having network of friends. So this is one of the findings from the CCS study. Then we have 2 more case studies, which is I started the health and well-being together. So we take two health case. One is the infant stage health. It's very important recent development is the increase of the difficulty playing with peers. That is one case study. The elderly stage health case is the care rehabilitation needs. And the first difficulty playing with peers, we abbreviated to DPP, and CCS use the difficulty playing as an early indicator of the delay in social communication capability of the children, and this often is an early signal for the developmental disorder. And people often ask the following questions. First question is whether difficulty playing is actually increasing in the younger generation or just caused by change in diagnostic criteria. And the second question is what are the real causes of difficulty playing? The way of parenting matters. These are two questions which we want to ask for the CCS studies. The first one is whether the DPP is actually increasing. And you can look at from this diagram that difficulty playing is increasing very rapidly. In some two cities, the most increase was a baby boomer junior generation, but most of the cities, young generation, the ratio has largest jump. So we are applying the same questionnaire to the older generation people. So we actually we can show that this increase is real one, not a change of the definition of the developmental disorder, etc. And the uniqueness of the CCS, there are no official statistics in some of these risk factors as much as 50, 60 year time span. So in some cases, the CCS gives only one evidence in the long-term development of these risk factors. And the another uniqueness is the definition of the determinants subjective. CCS uses the same question to all generation of people. So the results are not affected by the change of the official definitions. And another findings is a risk. Once people becomes difficulty in playing, they increase the various risks, sometimes almost 4.6 times at a school age, the bullied, risk of being bullied. And as for the poverty, the 2.1%, 1 times increase. So the difficulty playing is actually the very big risk factors. And this is analysis of the causes of the difficulty in playing with peers. And we listed 5 largest causes, and out of 5, the 3 are related to the parents-children relationship. The first one is often scolded. This increased the risk by 1.7%. And the second one is the little contact with father, 1.3 times. But these two has a very large ratio of the risk holders ratio. So the total influence on the risk increase is very high. And the final one is the little contact with mother. This is the risk factors which is the children owns. But another findings of the CCS is the parents' risk affect the much on the children's difficulty playing. And these are the risks which is owned by parents. And the largest risk factors of the parents is anxiety for rearing child. And this increase the risk of difficulty in playing of the children 17 times more. And these are all other phases of parents' risks. All has a very big risk expansion ratio. So the parents' risk affects even more to the children's risks. And this is a summary of the conclusion. So DPP is actually increasing, and relationship with parents is the most important factor for the difficulty playing. The case study 2 is most relevant for the current Japan's problem of aging of the population, and so care rehabilitation needs. Care rehabilitation needs has been and will be the critical issue for Japan, causing exploding medical welfare expenditure and lowering quality of life for elderly people. So the question 1 is, what are the major causes of the care rehabilitation needs? And the second question is, how best we can prevent care rehabilitation needs? And this is a table when people have care rehabilitation needs, they will increase these later stage risks by almost 9 times or 7 times. So huge increase if the people becomes care rehabilitation needs compared with other well people. They increase the risk by very big risk expansion rate, and even poverty 5.8 times. Then, what is the causes of care rehabilitation needs? First, we look at the direct cause or the short-term trigger of the care rehabilitation needs. And we counted 6 major direct causes, and out of 6, 4 are related to the mental health risks: depressed, life is meaningless, anxiety sleeping disorder, no trusted groups. These are the mental health risks, and these are the major cause of immediate cause of the rehabilitation needs of the elderly people. But the story is not only here. And if we take a longer term view and calculates comprehensive impact basis, some of the risk expansion rate, even the infancy and school day risks have a very big impact on the old day care rehabilitation needs. Just take an example of the if person has a risk of difficulty in learning during his school days, then he or she increased by 2.1 times the care rehabilitation needs when they got old. And if he's abused during the